leads you in the work that you do already now and into the future. And I hope particularly that you find organisations that can fund your work, and that you meet people with whom you can share wisdom and support, so that together, all of us in a changing world can sustain both what we do and the hope that leads us on today and into the future. I'm going to invite Rebecca Evans from the diocese, who's part of the team who have put this together and are leading it today, to come and tell us some practical stuff about housekeeping and things like that. Rebecca.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here again, and we're really enjoying exploring St Martin's Church, Liskeard, which actually is nice and warm and has toilets and a kitchen as well. So I know it's been part of the Meet the Funders programme in the past. For most of you that you were here yesterday, so there's nothing new really, just to say that you are unable to unmute on Zoom, so please be aware of that. If you have any questions or anything like that, please pop them into the chat box. We've got people monitoring the chat. We'll either answer them there or we'll pick them up and say them out loud and answer them within the session. Please could you also rename yourselves so that your actual name is on the screen, not somebody's iPad or user number 374 or something like that, just so that when it comes to the workshops, we know which workshop to allocate you to and where to put you. We have got a screen break at 11:30, and you'll find the agenda for the day within the resource document booklet, which is in your packs. If anybody is tweeting, we are using the hashtag MTF, which is Meet the Funders, so a capital M, a small t, and a capital F, then online, all in lowercase, 22. Okay, we hope you enjoy the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rebecca. Let me pray for the work that we're doing here today, for the conversations that we'll have, for the thoughts and the plans that will emerge from today, and then we'll get on and hear our first speaker. So let us pray. Loving God, thank you for this time together, for the great gift of technology that makes it possible. Thank you for 10 years of Meet the Funders. Thank you that we can share expertise and resources and kindness with each other. Thank you that you call us to serve the world that you love. As we pray for the conversations that we will enjoy today, for the information that we will share, and for the ideas that we will have, so we pray also that your kingdom might come here on earth as it already is in heaven, that the whole earth might know the justice, peace, and love that you designed us for. And we pray this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Good. We're going to hear from our first speaker now, who's going to be speaking to us from the National Churches Trust, the NCT. The speaker's not able to be with us live, as it were, but has sent a pre-recorded video through. If you do have, this is true now, but for all of our speakers, if you've got questions or thoughts that occur to you as you hear what they've got to say, do add those questions to the chat box. We're going to be monitoring that carefully, and although NCT, the National Churches Trust, can't be here to answer them in person, as our other speakers will be able to, we will be gathering up all the questions, any questions that you might have for NCT, and sending them to them, and they have said that they will come back with answers to those. So do ask your questions for our recorded speaker, just as you will do for our live speaker. And feel free to do that. Don't just wait till the end. If something occurs to you while they're speaking, while you're listening, then do pop it in the chat box. We'll keep a close eye on that and make sure that you get practical answers, because that's what today is all about, to your important questions. So our first speaker from the National Churches Trust, we're going to hear from them now. I think it might be someone called Emily Hine, and National Churches Trust, if you're not already aware of it, dedicated to supporting places of worship of historic, architectural and community value that are used by all kinds of different Christian denominations right across the UK. And they do that particularly by providing grants for urgent repairs for community facilities, which we're enjoying here in St Martin's today, and by helping places of worship keep their buildings in good repair. On which note, one of the areas that we might be thinking about around sustainability in your church and more broadly in the future is around net zero. One of the top tips for our churches about how to reach net zero is to make sure your building is in good repair, because when you have to do the big works, those are very intensive in terms of the carbon use. So the better your basic clearing of gutters and keeping the church in good repair, the less you'll have to do the major works, which adds to our overall carbon footprint. So we're going to hear from National Churches Trust, we think from Emily Hine, their church support officer.
Hello, my name's Nigel Mills. I'm the interim head of church support here at the National Churches Trust. Sorry I can't be with you today. I'm actually speaking to you from the offices of the National Churches Trust here in Westminster. I want to talk to you today about our grants programmes and the funding we have available for churches. But before we do that, I just want to explain a little bit about the National Churches Trust. So if you haven't heard about us before, we are the national charity that wants to work with you to keep our wonderful UK churches open, well used, well maintained and valued. We do that by helping sustain our church buildings and inspiring support for them. And we do that, of course, by providing grants for repairs, maintenance and facilities. And that's probably what we're probably best known for, but we also provide advice and guidance and training. So if you haven't been on our website, you'll find a wonderful treasure trove of videos and help guides about setting a friends group, establishing a maintenance plan, what to think about when doing an inspection on a church, etc. And we also do online training as well as in-person training on topics ranging from warm welcomes in churches to how to engage a treasurer and things like that. We also work with a wider audience and trying to inspire support and increase the perception people have of churches and the value they put on churches. So if you haven't come across it before, you might have heard of the House of Good report that we published 12-18 months ago, which put a value on all the wonderful things that happen in our church, and it valued it at £13 billion a year. And we've been using that report to demonstrate the value to the wider community of church buildings. You might have also come across the campaign that we started at the back end of last year, fronted by Michael Palin, about the future of UK's churches and trying to discover what people thought of the churches post-pandemic and what their future could be. And we've just published the results of a communication and collaboration that we've done together. We've got a growing Friends membership, so it's been growing year on year. Last year it grew by 20%, and this is a cohort of people who are interested in churches and want to do the best by churches and shout loudly about how great they are. And then we also work with congregations and visitors, looking at practical ways in which they can increase the number of people visiting their churches. So I can move from the very warm welcome to how you tell your stories and things like that. But I know you want to hear about funding and our grants programmes. So without further ado, I'll start to talk about those. So effectively, we run 3 grants programmes. We've given them fancy names: Foundation Grants, Gateway Grants and Cornerstone Grants, but they are effectively a small and medium and a large grants programme. So the Foundation Grants programme gives grants of up to £5,000, Gateway up to £10,000, and then our flagship programme, the Cornerstone, can give grants of up to £50,000. Now, each of those grant programmes is doing something slightly different, but they are all primarily aimed at the structure and the fabric of the church building itself. So we can't look at things in your churchyard, we can't look at a separate church hall. It's about the fabric and the structure of the church building itself. I'd say that all those programs are doing something slightly different, but there's some core eligibility criteria across all three of our grant programs. So you've got to be, in order to be able to apply, you've got to be a church that is located in the UK. So being down in the southwest, you will be eligible. The building has got to have been built originally as a place of worship. So we can't look at those buildings that were originally a barn or a schoolhouse and have been converted into a place of worship. It needs to have been originally built as a place of worship, and it must be at least 30 years old. So for the arithmetically able, you've already worked that out, but it's got to be before 1992. It's got to be open for regular public worship, and the benchmark of that is quite low. So it's only 6 public worship sessions a year, but they can't be baptisms or weddings. They've got to be proper public worship sessions. The work can't have started by the time you apply, put your application in, but it can have started before you get a funding decision for us. So it can't have started by the time you press submit on your application to us. When you submit to us, you must have raised 50% of your funds. And the reason we ask this is not because we want to join something that has already got a bit of a groundswell to it. It's just because with our limited supply of funds that we've got, our pockets aren't bottomless, unfortunately. We want to be funding projects that are almost ready to get on site, that won't get weighed down in lots of other fundraising that needs to happen, or get way set by price raises and things like that, that actually can say, well, actually, this is one of the last pieces of the jigsaw we can enable you to get on site. Your church building should be open outside of worship. So we're looking at benchmark pre-COVID was 100 days a year. So that's 2 days a week where other things are happening within your church, your place of worship. If your building is listed, then we would expect that the works will be overseen by a conservation accredited architect or professional. And the reason we ask for this is that if they are conservation accredited, we can be assured that the work is being done in the right way. If we're not, I mean, old historic buildings are quite unique things, and they need looking after in a special way, and they need to have an understanding of that. I think we've seen far too many examples quite recently of work that was done in all good faith that is now having to be put right at a cost because it was done wrong in the first place. If you're doing repair works to your building, we'll need to see that you've got permissions in place, and pretty much for all repair work you'll need permission. So looking at the Anglican system, you might not need full faculty, but pretty much all work would require a list B permission from your archdeacon if it doesn't require the faculty. And lastly, you must have multiple quotes in place, or you'd be going out to tender. And the reason we ask for this is because at the end of the day, the funds that we have are charitable funds, they're public funds, and we need to ensure that we're getting value for money and the money is being spent in the best possible way. We are a significant funder of church buildings, so our grants pot annually at the moment is about 1.5 million. It goes up and down from that depending on what other funding we manage to secure, but this year it's about 1.5 million. We're not the biggest funder of heritage in the country. There are other funders that fund far bigger projects and at far greater budgets than that. But the one thing that is in our favour is that we fund exclusively churches. So all our funds go to churches to help churches be well maintained, warm, welcoming, and have a sustainable future. We're currently funding about 1 in 4 applications, which you might think is quite low. So 3 applications aren't successful. What I would say though, in terms of the applications that we get, 30% surprisingly are just ineligible from the outset. So although we've got guidance notes on our website showing what we will fund, we're quite upfront about we can only fund work to the church building itself. We still get lots and lots of applications from people who want to do things in their churchyards, or they want to do work to the heating, the boilers, which we can't fund, or lighting, or clocks, or monuments. So we're focused purely on the structure of the church building. So you're looking at roofs, walls, drainage, anything that is not movable, that actually is counted as a structure of the build. And obviously, because we cannot fund things that are less than 30 years old, we can't fund any new build stuff. So just diving into a bit more detail into our 3 programs. So our Foundation Grants program is our newest grant program. It's been running for about 3 years, and this is primarily focused on maintenance of church buildings. So it's small amounts of money that actually help you tackle things proactively that stop them either becoming a worse problem or creating other problems. And they're typically things that are identified within your inspection reports, or you notice that you've got a slip tile, or you notice you've got some water ingress that's started to come somewhere because your mortars is not quite right, your lime mortar, or you've got a problem with your drains, or your guttering needs clearing out, or you've got a broken downpipe. It's that sort of thing. Doesn't cost a lot of money, but is relatively straightforward to fix. And therefore grants of up to £5,000 can help you do that. So as I've already said, we'd probably expect you to have permissions in place for that work. It probably will be List B. You must have 50% of your funding in place, and you must have 2 quotes for that. Our Foundation Grants programme doesn't have a set deadline. It's a rolling programme throughout the year. So if you submit, say, in January, you should get a decision by February. And the idea is that we want to encourage you to get on and do these things as quickly as possible. So we've got a hard deadline at the end of the year, which is the 31st of October. And great, although you can submit any time throughout the year, what we are finding is that most applications come in the back end of the year where things become more competitive. So if I had a top tip for you, I'd say if you've got something ready to go, submit it now, submit it early in the year, and your chances of success are greater. The Foundation Grants Programme probably is our programme with the most high success rate, and we're funding currently about 1 in 2 applications. Our Gateway Grants Programme is split into 2 strands. So one is repairs. So it is, again, those repairs, slightly larger repairs. So it's repairs of up to £100,000, which we can give grants of up to £10,000 for. Again, it's usually work that is identified within your recent inspection report. And again, would expect permissions to be in place, 2 quotes, etc., and it to be led by a conservation accredited professional if your building is listed. Unlike the Foundation, there are set deadline dates every year, each year, so we've got 3 per year. So unfortunately, we've just missed one. It's the 12th of May, so the next one will be September. But they're rolling throughout the year, so I have 3 every year. So it's just well to know when these are coming up, and you can apply in. Other advantages of our Gateway grants is that there are project development grants available. So these are grants that you know you've got an issue, maybe water coming in somewhere or damp somewhere, and you don't know what the problem is, or what's causing the problem, or what the solution is. So Gateway grant development allows you to do some investigation and establish what the problem is, and develop a plan for how you're going to address that. It also lets you do some planning if you're thinking about installing facilities into your church. So planning and scoping out, option appraisals, community consultation, something like that. And then our flagship grants programme is our Cornerstone Grants programme. So this is grants of up to £50,000 for those major repairs, those urgent structural repairs that that have been identified as category A, category B, or 1 or 2 within your inspection report, and are serious money to put right. So you're looking at a lot of replacing roofs or stonework or structural things that need to be addressed. The other strand to our Cornerstone Grants programme is that we can also look at installing facilities, but that must include kitchens and toilets. And for that strand, the project's got to cost over £30,000. So again, with our Cornerstone Grants programme, we'd expect at least 2 quotes or to be going out to tender. Your permissions should be in place. With toilets and facilities and major repairs, we'd expect that to be full faculty or whatever the equivalent is within your denomination. And if your building is listed, then your professional has to be conservation accredited. I'm not going to talk about lots of other funding that's available because I think you get talks about that from other funders throughout the day. One other thing I want to mention is if you're a grade 1 or a grade 2 star listed building applying to either our Gateway or our Cornerstone Grants programme for a repair project, then you will automatically be considered for a Wolfson Foundation as well. So our grants committee makes these decisions. So one application could result in 2 grants. We've also got a relationship with a number of other trust funders who generally want to remain anonymous, but who can make recommendations in. So on quite a few occasions, one application actually results in 3 or 4 grants. So it's well worth that application process. So talking about the application process, all our grants are online. So you access them through our website. When you go onto our website, what you're confronted with is a set of guidance notes. So we've got a comprehensive set of guidance notes for each programme. That helps you decide which is the right programme for you. You go in there and then you're presented with an eligibility quiz. Now, the eligibility quiz is not there to trip you up. It's to guide you through those things that, as we've already said, what is eligible and what is not eligible. So don't treat it as a thing with come through here, I'll be able to get a grant, etc. It's to save you time from filling in the form if you don't have to, because actually you're not eligible, you want to do work in your churchyard or something like that. Once you're through that, you get into the application portal and it looks something like that. You put in your email and your password and it allows you access to the form. Now there are 3 different portals. There's one for the foundation, one for the gateway and one for the cornerstone. For each application, the application form is slightly different. So for foundation, it's just 4 pages long. For gateway, it's 5. For cornerstone, it's 6. So you expect more information for the bigger grant programs. The beauty about it being online is once you've registered and started to fill your application, you can do a bit, save it, come out, go back to it. You don't have to do it all in one time. And we don't get to see anything that you're writing within this application until you press submit. So you can write all your notes in here as well. What I would say is once you've completed your application form, be it 4 or 5, don't think, well, phew, that's it, done. We also ask for various supporting documents. Do make sure that you put these in because they are part of the assessment process. You might not think they are, or of course, things like images or accounts. You think, oh, well, sure, I've got a set of 2018 accounts available. I'll put those in, and those will do. They are all important, and they're there for a reason. So do make sure you spend some time bringing those together. Once you've submitted, basically your application will go through a 3-stage process. It goes through initial eligibility check. So that's sort of going through, is it a place of worship, etc. It then goes on to this scoring criteria. So this is set out within the guidance notes, and it's scored against 5 criteria. So heritage, which is important to us. So if it's grade 1, grade 2, it speaks for itself. But if it's not, then you're probably going to work a little bit harder telling us about the heritage of your church and why it is important. The need. So this is what is wrong with the church and why does it need fixing? So, we've got a hole in our roof, our drains are backing up. That's the need. But I would also talk about the effect that it's having on you and the church. So buckets in the aisles, backing up water, dripping water that's causing problems elsewhere. The case for investment is, why is it urgent now? So that could be, because it's causing other issues. It could be because actually you've got some other funding that is going to run out in time-wise, you need to get it on site now. It could be that this has been outstanding for some time and it really needs to be done now. It could also be about the deprivation of your area. So the case for investment looks, sorry, that's what I've done. So the risk management then is looking at how well planned is the project. Is it led by a project team? Have you got all your quotes in place? Has it been out to tender? What's the specification looking like? Have you justified why you're replacing the whole roof rather than just replacing some tiles on the roof? And then lastly is the impact. And this looks at, so we've got 3 outcomes that we want to try and help you achieve. So it's preserving heritage, promoting sustainability, and inspiring support. So these are our outcomes and we want to help you achieve those things. So if you're a foundation grant, we just expect you to be looking at 1 of those. If it's a gateway grant, 2 of those. If it was a cornerstone grant, we'd expect you to be meeting all 3 of those. This is just a reminder of what our deadlines are. So I say foundation grant is a rolling programme throughout the year. Gateway has 3 deadlines a year. You've just missed one, unfortunately, so the next one is the 15th of September. And a cornerstone, we're just coming up to a deadline on the 4th of July. So, top tips for applying. I've always said I think there's some misconception that grant funding is a dark art. Some people are very good at it and they manage to magic money out of nowhere. All I would say is it's a learned art, and you as people, congregations, volunteers within your church are the experts in your church. So in terms of if you're putting an application into us or anybody, I would say there are three basic components to this. And I've learned this, having worked 15 years in the voluntary community sector. You always lead with the need. So tell us what is wrong and why it is urgent, and paint that picture of buckets in the aisles and water coming in, etc., and the damage that it's doing. We'll see, lead with the need. You tell, and then what is it that you're going to do? So why? So if you're replacing lead with lead on your roof, great. If you're putting zinc up there, why are you doing that? If you're replacing the whole roof rather than part of the roof, why are you doing that? And then thirdly, what is the difference that this project is going to make? So yes, it is going to preserve heritage, but actually what we also want to be hearing about are the wonderful things that are happening within your church building. So my other top tips are, just very quickly, always read the guidance notes. So we've got 3 guidance notes, one for each programme. In there, there's some wonderful things about what we look at within each programme. I'd get my highlighter pen out and I'd underline the buzzwords and make sure that those are the things I'm saying within this application. When you go through our application, we've got a little question mark by each one. And so if you come into a question and think, oh, I've already answered this, and I'll cut and paste my last answer from question 2 into question 3, that's the wrong approach. Click on the question mark and you'll see what we're after. We don't ask the same question twice, so always look at our notes within the guidance. Plan ahead, so you can view the questions in advance, you can download them, you can scribble on them, you can save your application, you can let other people have a look at your application and comment and critique. If there's one thing that churches are good at, it's committees, and we can certainly see the applications that have been through several pairs of hands are the stronger applications that come to us. I've already said it, make sure that you supply all the documents. You might think some documents are less important than others, but believe me, a good picture goes a long way. A well thought through options appraisal goes a long way. A nice set of accounts goes a long way. And don't just let the documents speak for themselves. If there's some particularly pertinent points in your quinquennial or your inspection report that shows how bad it is, make sure that you're quoting that back in the main body of your application. And just beware of any deadlines. The number of people we get can we say, oh, we just missed the deadline last week, can we submit and can it be considered? Unfortunately, the deadlines are there for a reason. There's a process for us to go through in order to get everyone to the grants committee in time. And everybody's project's urgent. So the deadlines are there for a reason, to plan in advance. This is just very quick do's and don'ts in terms of the Inspiring Heritage, and the main gist of this is the do's, the really good ones in terms of the well put together applications are very specific, so you can see that they've thought through. So here you can tell it talks about the exact age of the roof, it talks about the number of people that are engaged every year, it talks about who they'll engage, we'll talk about what the uses will be, specific uses. Don'ts are more to do with, well, there's a bit more wishy-washy language there, so we hope that this might happen. It could happen like this, or it more likely. And I'll just draw your eyes to the very last point on the bottom right of the slide, where they go, and this is what you might think, but don't say this in an application to somebody who focuses majorly on maintenance and repairs. Maintenance is a distraction, major repairs all the more. So I think you need to be telling us how important maintenance and repairs are to you and to your church. So that's all I've got to say. I think I probably went slightly over, and apologies for that. What I would say is, if you don't succeed, we will give you feedback on your application as to why not. There isn't a limit on the number of times you can submit an application. So if you act on that feedback, the success rate on people who come back into our grant programs, actually on that is much higher than the 1 in 4. If you get a letter of success saying that you've got a grant, brilliant, well done. Pop open the champagne or the fizzy water, whatever you drink, and make sure everybody knows about that. And lastly, you know, in terms of, we do talk a lot about grants, but actually what we want much more is a relationship with you. So unfortunately, I'm not here to answer any questions, but if you do have any questions, please do feed them through. That's my email address. Feed them through either through the conference or through to me directly. But I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Nigel, and we're really grateful to him for giving us such a thorough and detailed explanation of the work of the Historic Churches Trust, and particularly that advice, those top tips, that very clear way of laying out that he did of how you can go about, give yourself the best chance of being successful in making an application. He mentioned early on in his input, in his video, a report, the Home for Good, House for Good, sorry, that the Historic Churches Trust has put together. If you're into reading that kind of stuff, then I really recommend you going and having a look at their website. It's not specifically about how to make an application for their money, but it says some really, really important things about the place and the value of our church buildings in this country. Just to give you a couple of headlines from it, they now know that the government itself measures the impact of the money spent on buildings, and that what they say is that for every £1 that's invested in a church building, the return on that investment of £1 is the equivalent of £16. Now that's a staggeringly high rate of return in social capital. And they don't just mean because then there are some nice buildings that people can kind of look at, although that is true. They figure this out as well. This is a quote from that report. Churches are delivering care to those in need worth twice as much as the total spend on adult social care by local authorities in England. The churches, people like you, in buildings like this, are delivering care to those in need that is worth twice as much as the total spend on adult social care by local authorities. That's a staggering conclusion to the research that they have done. And I hope massive encouragement to you and to those that you're working with. So our thanks to Nigel for putting that video together and sharing that information. He can't take our questions now, but just to repeat what we said at the beginning, if you do have any questions that it would be good to get an answer to from Nigel and his team, please put them into chat. We'll gather them all together and we will send them off to the Historic Churches Trust, and they have promised that they will get back to us with answers which we'll pass on to you. So don't hold back in the chat box. I can't see any questions immediately on, or any reflections on the chat at the moment. So we're slightly ahead of time. It means you might get your coffee break a little bit earlier than planned. Assuming that our next speaker is ready to go from Garfield Weston Foundation, I think we'll move on. I'm waiting for some kind of wave or sign that that's a good thing to do. Yeah, that's good. So our next speaker is Harriet Brooks, who's the grants manager for Garfield Weston, along with Flora Haig, who's the head of grants. Many of you will already have benefited from the work of the wonderful Garfield Weston Foundation, a family-founded grant-making trust to support charities of all sizes and all kinds across the UK. Just to introduce our two speakers, Harriet oversees applications to the Garfield Weston Faith, Community and Environment programmes, and Flora manages the overall grant-making operations as a whole. She's got a particular focus on the sectors of arts, education, and museums and heritage. Flora also supports the National Emergencies Trust, most recently as a member of the Allocations Committee, which has helped distribute £100 million to frontline charities that have been supporting people through the COVID-19 pandemic. So our thanks to Flora and to Harriet for joining us today. And I'll hand over to them now for their input.
Well, it's really nice to meet you all today, and I'm hoping that the slide deck might appear shortly. I'm not sure if there's somebody who's controlling it from your end. Fantastic. We missed the earlier speakers that you've had, but I hear you've got a very busy day, so I've been given a very brief, I think 10 minutes to talk to you this morning about the Garfield Weston Foundation to give you some insight. And As introduced, I'm Flora Craig. I'm the Deputy Director at the Gulfwood Western Foundation, and Harriet Brooks has joined me as well, who's also on screen somewhere. We're both available to answer questions after this. What we'd suggest is put questions in the chat box, and we're very happy to answer them sort of as a group at the end, rather than answer questions as we go. But you know, please feel free to make the most of the opportunity and ask us questions if you have them, either about the talk or about you know, your something that you would like to know about the way that you might apply to us. So if I can have the first slide, please. I'll just get started in any case. So in order to be as sort of succinct as possible, there's lots of information, first of all, on our website. So if you haven't heard of us, you haven't applied to us before, and you want to know a bit more, then please do look at our website, and we'll send around some links and some information afterwards in terms of where you might need to look to find out things. But just to kind of get you started so that you know whether you are eligible or not to apply, we accept we have a very broad range of criteria in order to be able to apply to us. You must be a UK registered charity or a CIO to apply, or you must fall under the Charity Commission exemptions. And so I think there's probably quite a lot of Church of England churches on this call today, and you would fall under those exemptions. Effectively, we look to the Charity Commission for eligibility. So as long as you fit within one of their criteria, then you are eligible to apply to us. Just to confirm, because there's always a question that's asked, we don't fund CICs. So if you're a CIC, I'm afraid you're not able to apply for funding to the foundation. We fund across the whole of the UK, but we're always really interested in finding new corners of the UK that we haven't quite touched. And so it's great to be able to speak to you in Cornwall today. So hopefully, if you haven't yet thought about applying, please don't be put off by the distance you might have from us in our office in London. We're really keen to make sure that our money is spread as equitably across the country as possible. So, you know, don't feel that, you know, that you have to be close to us in order to be able to apply to us. And we fund across a broad range of categories. So faith is one of the categories that we fund alongside, and they're listed here: youth, welfare, community. The environment, as with everyone, we have a very particular focus on at the moment. And again, arts, heritage, health, and museums as well. So when you come to apply to us, if you decide to do so, don't worry too much about deciding which category you best fit under. We ask you to tell us, but effectively we'll decide, we use those categories in order to be able to monitor how our expenditure is being spread across the country and across our categories. So don't get too worried. If you don't feel you fit naturally in a box, tick the one you think represents you the best, and we'll always make an adjustment. It will have no bearing on whether you're successful or not, because the trustees do not allocate predetermined funds per category. So it's not like the faith category has a certain amount in it and the youth category has twice as much in it. So if you choose the right one, you've got double your chances. We look at every application on its own merit, regardless of the category that it represents. So please don't get too worried about it. There are some things that we don't do, so it's important to tell you those. We don't fund animal charities. We don't fund individually named salary posts. So for example, if you want to have a general manager post, we won't fund a single individual post. We don't fund projects that are happening outside the UK or one-off events and festivals. And we tend to, our trustees are very practical people, and they tend to like to fund things that are really directly impacting beneficiaries. So we don't tend to prioritise work that might be considered to be either campaigning or lobbying work. So those are some of the things that we don't do, but I can answer questions on that if people have them at the end. So if I could have the next slide, please. As I think we said at the beginning, we're a very broad funder. We give away, I think in the last financial year, about £98 million across about 2,000 grants. We get about 4,000 applications a year. So a very high volume grant maker. And we have two streams of funding, I suppose, although the way to apply is broadly similar. So the first is our major grants programme, which is for grants of over £100,000. Now, I don't think these are probably the focus of today, because they really are for very large scale projects. We'd ordinarily expect the project to be well over £1 million and or the organisation to have a turnover of over £1 million. So they're for really very substantial projects. But if you feel like you've got one of those, then the thing to do is to write us a very brief summary, no more than 2 pages, explaining the project and its timescales and the costs. And then we'll take a look and give you some advice, bespoke advice as to whether we think that's a major grant application or you'd be better to come through our regular grants programme. So our regular grants programme is for any grant up to £100,000. So that's where the cutoff is. And that is, we give grants across all aspects of your work. So it could be unrestricted core or revenue funding, it could be project funding, or it could be capital funding, so building related, new roofs, new boilers, disability access, all the things that people are grappling with in order to make their buildings fit for purpose. So we do all of those things, and we also are able to offer multi-year grants as well. So on occasion, if charities need some additional security to know that they're going to be okay over the next few years, and they've got activity that they can demonstrate they'll need funding for, then you can apply for a multi-year grant. We touched on the specific post, the named salary posts. We won't fund a single named salary post. And I think just to give further explanation for that, the reason is because trustees don't want to be responsible for a single person's employment within your organisation. We totally understand that salaries are part of a core cost request, so by all means tell us what it costs to pay your staff, but we won't sort of be the kind of named funder of a single salary. Just in case you come back another year and ask for that funding again, we're not able to give it for whatever reason, and that person's job is then somehow in jeopardy. So the trustees, you can imagine, don't want to have that responsibility within your organisation. So if I could have the next slide, please. In terms of application process and timeline, we always say, and I'm sure you're going to hear this repeated endlessly all day, please read the guidelines. We've written a set of guidelines which we've taken a lot of trouble to do and very much are geared towards anyone who wants to apply to us. You don't have to be a professional fundraiser. You could be just a volunteer trying to raise money for your church. So follow those guidelines, have a look at them. And they cover pretty much everything we'd expect to see in an application. So you're very welcome to sort of look at them, use them as the kind of scaffolding for how you put together your proposal, because we don't have an application form as such where you have to fill in lots of boxes for us. We ask you to tell us the story of your project in your own words and make the case for why you need support. But the guidelines will really help you get a sense of the things that you ought to be covering within that proposal. The majority of our applications come online. We have an online system. I think over 90-something% now apply online. But if you really feel that technology is not your strong point, don't panic. You can apply via post. We do accept postal applications. So you can just send those to us, to our office. We're all here in our office now, and they'll get uploaded to our system by one of our team. So apply online or in the post, but please don't do both. It's always very confusing to receive but the same thing twice because it becomes duplicated in our system. In our regular grants process, we have no deadlines to worry about. You apply at a time that suits you best. We're making regular grant decisions. Our trustees make regular grant decisions on a weekly basis. So it's a rolling programme of decision making, and you apply when you think it's the best time to do so. It takes up to about 4 months to get a decision. So when you apply, bear that in mind because we can't fund things retrospectively. So be thinking ahead, 6 months or so in order to make sure you're putting forward a really strong case for the work you plan to do and the financial need that you have. We have a small grants team here. We all look at applications. We make assessments of them. We ring you up and ask you questions if we want more information. Lots of us are former fundraisers, so we know how difficult it is. So hopefully we come to it with a reasonable, healthy dose of sympathy for how challenging it is to find money. But, we also have to do a job for our trustees, which is around the due diligence and the checking of facts in your application. So if we ask you questions, it's always because we want you to make a really strong case and we're trying to help you do that. We're not doing it to be in any way annoying or to make your life any more difficult. It's because we want to get the right answers so our trustees can hopefully make the right decision for you. We organise, everything is done in order of receipt. So when you apply to us, you sort of join a queue. And as I said, it's a rolling programme. We can't it's very difficult for us to look at emergency support. I know that there's been a lot of emergency support over the last couple of years, totally understandable for COVID and all the challenges we've all faced, but it's much better to be thinking ahead and planning ahead when you consider applying to us. And then whether you're successful or not, your eligibility to reapply will be a minimum of 12 months. So if you're not successful, you'll have to wait a further year before you can come back. If you are successful with a 1-year grant, that's a year before you can come back again. If, for example, we gave you a multi-year grant, you'd need to wait for that entire grant to finish for your grant report to be submitted. So it could be over a number of years before you're able to reapply to us again. But certainly I would say if you've never applied and you do and you're not successful, don't think that that's your only chance and you've blown it, you can never try again. You are welcome to apply again. Sometimes the decision is more about, you know, available funds and the type of project you come for. It's not necessarily a reflection of the good work that you do. So always bear us in mind. We are here and we want to help you be successful. So if I can have the next slide, please. The next 2 slides, I'm just going to quickly go through some top tips for making a great application. Hopefully I'm okay for time. These are things that probably would apply to any application you make, but particularly they're things that we see in applications that we think work really well. So for us, we ask you to write an up to 10-page proposal. It doesn't have to be 10 pages if you don't feel you've got 10 pages of information to tell us. Some projects are very straightforward. They can be done in 5 pages. But broadly, what we're looking for is the who you are, what you do, why you do it, when you do it, who's benefiting, what's the real impact of what you do. So really keep it focused, talk about yourself. Don't spend too long providing lots of external context. Really just get to the heart of what do you do, why is it important, and what's your need. We encourage you to bring it to life. So use case studies, use pictures. If you've got a capital project and you've got a terrible roof, show us a picture of the terrible roof so we can get a sense of how great the roof will be if only you could fix it. So we don't mind the warts and all pictures. In fact, they're sometimes really helpful because they tell a story very quickly to us about the state of the situation that you're facing. So bring it to life with that. Maybe use case studies of the people that use your building, if it's a village hall or a church hall, who comes to use it, how do they benefit? So again, keep it really, bring it to life, really make it easy for the trustees to get a sense of what it is you do. Provide some really clear budgets. In our guidance, you'll see there's some very clear outlines of what we think a budget should look like. So we need to see your income and expenditure projections. If it's for a specific capital project, then we'd like to see your capital budget, but also tell us how you run your organisation, because we'll always be interested to know if it's possible to run your organisation alongside doing a major capital project. A realistic funding plan is really important. And when I say that, I mean a really nice explanation of how you remain sustainable and able to do your funding. And it could be the broadest range of things, everything from renting out your hall, it could be a bake sale, it could be a sponsored walk, it could be corporate support, it could be grants and foundation funding like us. What we're looking for is a really sensible mix of stuff so that if for any reason something falls away, you've got a good plan for how you might fill that gap. I would say that as well that for trustees, it's really important to see local fundraising. I know lots of you do loads of stuff on the ground and that's picking up again now post-pandemic. But please really tell us, it doesn't have to be loads of money. And we know that that's not necessarily going to pay for your whole project, but it always gives our trustees a sense how well valued you are in the community. If you're able to raise money locally, it shows that people really care about what you do. So please do tell us about that. It's really important. Come to us when you've got some funds already in place. Don't come to us when you have got a project, you're right at the beginning, because that is difficult for the trustee to really get a sense of, well, is it actually going to be a successful project? In the case of a capital project, we really like you to have about half the funding in place and all the necessary permissions. So if you need a faculty or planning permission, make sure you've got that in place and then come to us when you're in a good shape. You know the project's going ahead. It's just a question of raising the final 50%. I always advise people to get somebody who knows you quite well, but not brilliantly, to read your proposal. So find yourself a critical friend who might read it through and just see where it is that you're not perhaps selling yourself as well as you could. I think we're all very British sometimes and don't say all the brilliant things that we do. So get somebody else to read it who can perhaps just help you amplify why your project's so brilliant and what are the things that really make it stand out from the crowd. Because that's what will happen when we look at the application. So get somebody to give you a hand with that. If I could have the next slide, please, and then I'll stop for some questions. In terms of common pitfalls, things that we see that just don't really work so well for us in terms of applications, and I suspect probably apply to other funders too. Try and avoid as possible the use of jargon or acronyms. We all talk in our own sort of corporate shorthand, and we do it amongst ourselves. Funders do it amongst themselves. Charities sometimes do it amongst themselves. But make sure that what you're saying is in plain English. It's something that we don't have to look up or puzzle over or think I don't actually know what that means. So make it as clear as possible. We're really practical people. We just want to understand what you do, and you're the expert, so you need to tell us in the clearest possible way what that is. As I said before, the fundraising plan needs to be really clear. Sometimes we get a sort of muddle of different things, or maybe a huge gap where people just haven't really thought, well, I'd like some money from you, but I haven't really thought about where else I'm going to. Make sure you've got a really good plan. We know it may not all come to fruition. You may not get all the amounts you've listed there, but tell us what you're aiming to do and how you're aiming to do it. And that will just give us confidence that you've really thought about your project and its success. We always ask you to, in terms of budgets, again, we need those to be really consistent. We need figures consistent throughout the application. And we often see, for example, a covering letter that might mention one amount of money, a body, the proposal talking about a slightly different amount of money, a budget showing something quite different. So make sure it's consistently applied throughout your proposal. And make sure you total up the budgets. I know it sounds really obvious, so you could probably think I'm mad saying it, but quite often we see these fantastically well thought through budgets and nobody's totaled them at the bottom. So as soon as we have to get out our calculator and try and work it all out for you, there's a risk we might get it wrong or we haven't understood it. And you're sort of, you're not putting forward the case in the best way that you possibly could. So just check you've got your maths right and it's really well displayed for us. We always ask you to send in your latest set of accounts, so they're very important. We know that accounts can be really complicated, so occasionally you might have things you need to explain to us. Don't let us jump to conclusions. If there's some stuff in your accounts that you think looks a little bit out of the ordinary, make sure you've alluded to it in your proposal in the financial section. So, for example, you might have been in receipt of a legacy, and that may make you look much richer than you are because that legacy may be earmarked for a very specific purpose. Or you might have had to run the organisation at a deficit in order to run down your reserves level. So on face value, it might look like you're not in great financial shape, but there's a good logic behind it. So make sure you told us what that logic is, because that will really help us not A, jump to conclusions, and B, make assumptions about your organisation. It's for you to tell us, so make it nice and clear. Again, make sure the narrative is as clear as possible. That's where your critical friend can help. Start from the beginning. Even if you've had funding from us before, make sure you reintroduce the organisation. What is it you do? Why are you important? Because although we may have seen an application from you before, we do look at a high volume of applications. We may not remember everything about you, and I'm sorry for that, but we do try and remember as much as we can. But make sure you're setting out the story again from the beginning when you reapproach us. And then the last thing is, if we do have questions for you, then we will ask you for more information, and please do respond as soon as you can. I know that you're all really busy doing the good work that you do in your communities, and sometimes those emails get slightly left to another day and then they sort of get forgotten about. But the reason we will have asked you for information is because we don't think you have quite the right information for trustees to make a good decision. So if we're asking you for more, it's really important you give us what we need, because that will probably help strengthen your case when it comes to be decided by trustees. So it's really great if you can prioritise a question from us, come back with the information as soon as you can, then it means that we can keep moving your application through the system for you and hopefully get you to a place where you might get a positive result as well. So that's my very quick, I was given 10 minutes. I think I might have overdone it and eaten into your coffee time, but I'm going to stop now and hopefully there'll be some questions, and I shall hand over to Harriet, might be able to point out some questions for me.
That was an incredibly helpful, both big picture overview and then all that beautiful detail about what makes for a good application. The thing I noted down was make sure you don't undersell yourself or be too modest. And I know from visiting churches and projects across Cornwall that there is plenty for us to not be modest about. So do tell people what you're doing and why it matters and why it's really wonderful. We have got some questions in chat. Let me, if I can read those to you, Flora, and we've got a bit of time because we were running a bit behind. So we've got till 10 past. That gives us about 6 minutes for these questions. So they're pretty practical ones. Question number one is, we've been successful, this is from Alison Richmond, we've been successful in securing funding from Garfield Weston. Do we wait 12 months from the end of this current grant to reapply, or is it 12 months from when we first applied? Oh, I can't hear you, I'm afraid, Flora. Don't know if you're on mute or if you have been muted. Can we hear back? Can we hear you? Special techie people, can we hear you? No?
Brilliant. I'm sorry, I put myself on mute, not knowing that I was unable to unmute myself. I needed someone else to unmute me. So the question was, you've currently got a grant. Effectively, it slightly depends what your grant's for. If it's for a capital project, you'll need to finish that whole project. It's about finishing the project that you asked us for, then submitting your report, and then you are welcome to reapply. The minimum period is 12 months, so regardless of how long your project is, you have to wait at least 12 months. But if, say, for example, your capital project is going to take 18 months, you're going to have to wait to finish that first. Then send in your report, and then you can consider reapplying. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you. That's very helpful. That was from Alison. This is a question from Chantal Shears. We're looking to run a pilot project. If this pilot goes well, could we then apply to you, to Garfield Weston, to run the project after the pilot's success?
Yeah, yes, I mean, you know, pilot projects are fantastic because they're very good ways of testing out ideas and making sure they work, and budgets and making sure beneficiaries really want this kind of service. So absolutely, if you're running a pilot now, then obviously I assume you'll evaluate it and assess the impact, and then start to build a more structured plan going forward. And absolutely, you can approach us for that. We're never going to be 100% funder, so we're not probably going to pay for the whole thing. But if you've got a plan for how else you might get financial support for it, then come to us, show us, you know, how well you've demonstrated success in your pilot, and explain how you're going to build on that going forward. And absolutely, we would consider that.
Great, thank you very much. Next question this is from David Raby from Truro Methodist Church. If the scheme needs planning approval, do we wait for that before making our application to you?
I would advise you to do that, because planning at the moment, certainly from our experience across the whole country, seems to be very delayed. And, you know, sometimes with the best will in the world, you think your planning will be very straightforward and take only the, whatever it is required, 12 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on the local authority. But there have been a lot of delays. So much better to come to us when you've got the most robust case, and the most robust case would include approved planning. So we know if we give you some funding, you're really ready to get going.
Great, thank you. That's a very clear answer. This is a question from Jasmine from Connect Communities, who starts off by saying this has been very helpful, so thank you. This is for a non-capital project. Is there guidance on how much we should have raised towards our goal before applying? So you don't fund 100%, but is there guidance on what proportion should already have been raised before the application?
I think it's always helpful to have at least some. I mean, half is great. It really depends. I mean, it always depends slightly on the size of the project, the type of other potential income sources. You may have a range of, it doesn't always have to be fundraised income that we're looking at. You may have a range of other income that you know you can attach to the project. So it could be that you've got some earned income coming in, and you're fairly confident because your cafe makes X amount of money a year that you can attach a certain amount to the project. So I think just look at your whole income plan and make sure that you can be confident with us that, you know, even if we were to give you something, that you've got some other sources of funding you can also lean on in order to make the project a success.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm afraid we've got more questions coming in even as you're answering these, so we might not be able to get through all of them. But the next one, this is a similar one to the one asked earlier about how long they have to wait for another application, but it's a slightly different flavour to it. We were very lucky to be successful in a grant from Garfield Weston. This is from Laura Dennis from Hugs Foundation. The grant's now coming to an end of, it's coming up to the end of our project. We'd like to continue it. Do we go through the same process to reapply reapply for the same project?
Yes,
I guess or is there a kind of update application that can be made, I suppose, is the kind of bracket?
Always apply completely fresh. So you effectively, when your project's ended and your grant period's ended, you send in what we call an end of grant report. And actually, this is a top tip: do not include a request for additional funding in that report, because it goes in a different sort of pot, as it were. You need to apply completely afresh, almost as if you haven't. I mean, obviously, you can allude to the fact that you've been successful before and you've managed to achieve all this with the Garfield Weston Foundation's help, but you need to send in a fresh application restating who you are and what you do.
Great, thank you. These are fantastically clear answers you're giving. I hope that those who are asking them are finding the same, that this is being useful. Couple more. We've got this is Keith Brown from GoGo Project. We've got a benefactor who's willing to prime our project with a cash interest-free loan and free issue of equipment. How should we show these in our grant application?
So in your income plan, in-kind support, if it's just in-kind support, then it's probably best to just outline it underneath your official, the budget, which involves hard cash. If you're actually getting a loan, then that can go into your income plan. But as long as you've explained to us what the terms of that loan is, so that we know that, for example, it's, it may be interest-free, but does it need to be returned within 2 years? So we can get a sense of the kind of risks around that loan. So again, it's about explaining it to us. But absolutely, it can be accounted for as income because it's helping you support the project.
Okay, great, thank you. And there's a follow-up to that from the same person, from Keith again. We've also got a national supplier willing to give free materials. Can that count towards existing funding? Presumably the answer is yes, it can, if it's properly shown in the application.
Yeah, I think if it's explained, then yes, it can. I mean, obviously, we're not going to be the only organisation that just gives you funding, cash funding for a project, if everything else is coming to you for free, because we'd ask questions about why would you need our help as well. So again, it's about really explaining that situation to us.
Okay, thank you. As quick as I can now, from David Oglethorpe, what assumption of success from our Garfield Weston and National Churches Trust should we assume in our fundraising plan? That's quite hard to answer quickly.
It's a really great question, and I'm not going to be able to answer it because we're such a broad funder. We don't really have a sort of success rate as such, because if you took all of the grants we made across the course of a year, we would give you a figure that wouldn't necessarily be relevant to you and your type of organisation. I mean, what I would say is if you really follow our guidance and you've got a very robust case and you put forward a very strong case for the work you do and it fits within our criteria, then you've got a really good chance of success. We don't sort of give you a success rate, though.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, David, it can't be more specific than that, but that's a helpful reply. I hope this gets a straight yes answer. Do you accept or encourage collaborative partnership applications?
Yes, we do. But again, obviously eligibility for us is a registered charity. So it depends who that collaborator and partner is. We certainly can't accept a collaboration where, for example, a charity applies to us and then asks to transfer that money to an organisation that we couldn't fund. We would not be eligible to apply to us in their own right. So we'd expect there to be one applicant who manages that project, even if they're using partners to help with it.
Great, that's very helpful, thank you. And a final question, and I think this is a significant one at the moment given what's happening with costs across the board. If an approved project goes over budget due to building costs, say, would Garfield Weston top up an already approved grant? And just in case this helps you to answer the question, she finishes by saying, great presentation, thank you.
Can I have some more money, please? I can't answer that directly because I don't make those decisions, but I can tell you that we are really, really finely tuned to the inflation issue, particularly in capital projects at the moment. So some of the questions when you apply to us for a capital project that we're going to start asking and be really, I suppose, quite robust about are the size of your contingency. And I think now in capital projects, we would be expecting about 20% contingency in your capital projects, because we're getting news from many capital projects we're funding at the moment, which are 20 to 30% inflated costs on what they originally expected. So we would look for a hefty contingency. We'd look to you explaining what your risk assessment is about what if your costs come back much higher. And I think, again, it's about applying at the right time. So don't come too early, try and come once you've got some, as close to fixed or quantity surveyor costs that you can get. I mean, ideally, if you've gone out to tender and you've got a contractor fixed cost, that would also help. We do look at occasionally uplifts, but we look at them on a bespoke basis. So if your project has run into trouble and you do find that you are short, there's not an automatic, we'll give you some more, here it goes. You'd need to come back to us with a brief update, make the case for why you're in the situation you are, all the mediating factors you've gone through in order to make sure that you can try and deal with it yourself. And then, the trustees will take a view as to whether they want to be able to give you a little bit more to help you.
Great. Thank you so much, Flora. That's the end of the questions. There are quite a lot of thank yous at the end of the comments for both your presentation and now for these answers. So I pass those on. Really, really helpful. And we're very grateful for you being with us and for all of the work that you already support and will go on to support here in Cornwall in the future. Thank you. We do need to move on now to our next speaker. We're running slightly over time, but for good reason. So one more set of speakers, one more organisation before our break, and it's Cornwall Historic Churches Trust who are going to speak to us now. I have a zero accuracy hit rate so far on introducing the right speakers. I've either given the wrong names, the wrong gender, or the wrong people. So this doesn't look like on my screen it's Caroline Tetley or Cecilia Bisson. It looks more like it might possibly be Jeremy Sharp. But whoever it is that's going to come and speak to us is from the Cornwall Historic Churches Trust. I know many of you will know of them already and their work. They assist in the restoration and repair of Cornish churches, which have architectural or historic merit. That's churches and chapels of all denominations who can apply for assistance, and they allow churches to apply for funding for regular maintenance projects and for emergency grants, and they prioritise structural work in particular on roofs, rainwater goods, also electrical safety and heating systems. And if your church is a member of Churches Together in Britain and Ireland, and your building is used for worship and is in need of restoration or repair, then you may well want to listen to what's about to be shared and to have a look at the website, which is www.chct.info, and there's information about that in your packs. So let me hand over now to Jeremy, if indeed it is Jeremy Sharp, and yes. And thanks for being with us.
Okay, you've done my presentation for me. And there's not much I need to say. I'm not quite clear about the slides. That's better. Yeah, okay. And you will be changing the slides for me, I assume. This is obviously the first slide. The presentation, there's quite a bit of detail on it. And I have done that deliberately because I think these slides are going to be shared afterwards, and I would like it to be a sort of a reference, really, so that people can look at it at leisure when they have the time to do that. I'll just run through the more important points now, and if I could have the next slide, please. As Bishop Hugh has said, we've been going since 1955. We're open to churches of all denominations. I think that's an important thing to say. We are fortunate that we are given funds from other organisations to distribute, providing they meet our criteria, and we can be a little bit more flexible with their funds than we would be normally. We give between 15 and 20 grants a year. They range from £250 to 5,000. Occasionally they go a bit more than that if it's a really big and special project. The total amount that we can distribute is in the region of 40 to 45,000 a year. Next slide, please. I just want to sort of stress why we do this. I think people tend to think that maintenance and buildings are tedious and awkward things and could be dispensed with if at all possible. We obviously disagree with that, and we have a duty to the past And I think it's really important to stress the benefits of what we do, not just structurally, but the knock-on effects that can come out of this. Obviously, it makes the buildings more attractive. It makes the buildings better suited for community use. It engages local communities. It hopefully will bring churches, people into churches, or at least to be involved with churches. And I think ultimately it can lead to an improvement in the financial viability of the church. And next slide, next two slides, please. The first slide, they're linked together, and I think if you do look through the presentation, I'd like you to read these. They are quotes from a case study, which is St Sampson's at South Hill, an article written by Judith Ayres, who was leading that project, who wrote to us saying what a wonderful thing church restoration is. And it was completely unprompted. She did it entirely off her own bat. I see she's just actually given you the link to the article. There are so many knock-on effects, the benefits to the community. I think it's really important to say that these sort of projects can be viewed as a form of mission. They have so many benefits from craftsmen, in the environment, and one could go on. I think it's a really positive thing to do. And if I can have the next slide, please. How we can help in all this. Our funds are applied for the preservation, maintenance, improvement, upkeep, beautification and reconstruction of churches in Cornwall. And we also help with monuments, fittings, fixtures, stained glass, furniture, ornaments and chattels in churches and churchyards. I'd like to stress also that we define churches as firstly open churches, and secondly places of worship of any age. It doesn't have to be an old building, but we tend to prioritise older buildings, and it can be of any denomination, as long as the organisation belongs to Churches Together in Britain and Ireland. And that's actually quite hard to define sometimes, but it's always worth asking if you're not sure if your particular denomination may not apply. And there have been one or two cases recently where we've had to look quite carefully to see whether that's the case. We very much hope that any support that we give will be useful when seeking grants elsewhere. And in the context of other grant organisations, we're happy to make awards at a very early stage. So it will, if you apply to other charities, you can at least say, well, we've had a pledge from the Cornwall Historic Churches Trust to help us on the way. And I'll come back to the conditions attached to that, but at least it will give you a leg up when applying elsewhere. Can I have the next slide, please? These are just really summarising our main priorities. Again, you've heard about all these just now, but it's really important that we feel that we concentrate on structural work, roofs, rainwater goods, all the boring things, electrical safety, windows, heating systems, and more recently we've started to include bells as well. We really want to promote timely and professional maintenance. We don't cover repairs to organs, and we don't normally cover new work. So kitchens, toilets, or reordering, we don't cover. But if the building requires alteration to accommodate the kitchens and the toilets, and say it needs a new roof or something like that, then obviously we would cover that structural work. If I could just have the next slide. And this is really just leading on to some of the churches that we've helped in the last year. So we can go through these pretty quickly. There are all sorts of churches, and again, to the next slide. There's St. Grader at Grade. This is part of a much bigger project, but we have sort of helped kick it off for re-roofing, repointing, replacement of rainwater goods, and we gave them a full grant of £5,000, and you can see they need a new roof. Lamoran was a church that was closed. We've helped. It was closed because of bat infestation. They got a grant to protect the bats, but keep them separate from the inside of the building, and we have paid for the restoration of the inside of the building. You can see a photograph of what it looks like now, but the church had been closed for some time, so hopefully it's going to reopen quite soon. Next one, please. St. Sampson, South Hill, I've included that. They have applied for 2 grants, and what we do is you can divide your project into mini projects, and you can apply for help with one part of the project, and then when you've got a bit more resources or so on, and you want to go on and do something else, then we can treat that as a separate application. In the case of St. Sampson's, we've made 2 grants, but this is one of them anyway. Next one. St. Neot, they're very important medieval windows. We gave a grant of £5,000 for that, and you can see in the corner there they are being repaired in that photograph. Next one. These are really summaries of other grants we've given. The church in the photograph is the Roman Catholic Church in Penzance. We've also gave a grant to, as you will see there, Truro Cathedral. Next slide. And again, these are the final churches there. Next slide, please. We have 3 main types of grant. Something we call the main sort of traditional grant is a restoration and repair grant, we call it. It's for the larger projects, more complex work. The maximum grant is £4,000. If you're a church friend, which is basically a member of Cornwall Historic Churches, the maximum grant increases to £5,000. We also have smaller project grants, which is for projects that are what you might call emergency projects, which have come out of a QI survey or something like that, where work needs to be done quickly. The maximum size of grant there is 1,000, and the maximum project size is £10,000 or less. And we will make a decision very quickly for that. Again, the third type is a grant to encourage you to have regular inspections of your churches, and which I'm sure you will do, but we will give you £250 if you can give us 2 invoices and show a commitment to regular maintenance inspections. This is just really to check gutters and roofs, hopefully every 6 months. Next slide, please. Applications can be done very simply. All the criteria are on our website. We have a simplified application form for the smaller projects and the maintenance grants. The smaller projects and maintenance grants can be assessed almost by return. The larger projects go to our 3-yearly trustee meetings. Next slide, please. We have area reps for each deanery, and they're listed there. Those are the names of the deanery reps there. Next slide. And I've listed here some other sources of help. You can see several of these organisations have already spoken to you, and the details are easily available. it's just, again, I put that there for general purposes. Next slide. We obviously rely on our members to supply resources for us to distribute, and we'd love everyone to be a friend of Cornwall Historic Churches. We'd also like the churches themselves to become church friends. It's not very expensive, and the idea is that if you become a friend, certainly you'll get a larger grant, and it's almost like contributing to a mutual fund. Your membership fee will then help other churches to receive grants in the future. So we feel it's really important to encourage as many churches to join as possible. There are of course, lots of benefits. Yesterday, we had a really good AGM with a fascinating talk from Nicholas Orme, who's a well-known authority on churches generally. So you are involved, and hopefully you'll get some benefit from the membership. Next slide. Again, if you want to, if you're a corporate person, then we'd love to hear from you for sponsorship, and we'd be even happier if any church organises a fundraising event at any time of the year, but shares the proceeds, some of the proceeds anyway, with Cornwall Historic Churches. Next slide. This is just an example. This is a bit of a sales pitch, sort of thing that we're doing at the moment. We're opening, Trebartha Gardens up near Launceston are opening their garden, and we are encouraging people to look around. It's one of the least known and probably most interesting gardens of all the gardens in Cornwall. Next slide. And finally, if you haven't provided us with a history of your church for our website, we certainly would like one. And if you do receive a grant, then do please keep in touch. There are, we put photographs, as you can see on the right there, of how our churches are getting on the website. We have a church of the month where we sort of feature projects that we think might be of interest to a wider audience. I think I'm just about done. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, not just for the presentation today, but for everything that you do at Cornish Historic Churches Trust. I've been to a decent number of those churches that you mentioned and that you funded, and seen some of the fantastic work that you've done. So thank you very much. We've got one question at the moment, although we are over time and caffeine is beckoning to us. But the question that we've got so far is, this is from Helen Reed at St Stephen's Church in Saltash: would replacement lighting systems come under electrical safety?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. That's a fantastically straightforward answer. Good news for you, Helen. And she's just replied, thank you. There are no other questions in the chat box, and I suggest we do pause then, and you'll go and get a screen break and top up your caffeine levels or your sugar levels. If there are further questions which come into the chat box, because as you have your cup of tea, you think of them, then do put them in. We'll make sure we get them to Jeremy and the team there and get you an answer back again. Jeremy, thanks very much again, and blessings to you and to your whole team and your whole work. We will see you all back again, everyone, at 11, well, let's say 11:43, so you get a full 10 minutes to make a cup of tea, and we'll be hearing slightly differently then from some of our experts, and we look forward to that. So see you in 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're full of tea or coffee or biscuits or whatever you've enjoyed. Slight change of tone now and of content. And we're going to hear Rebecca Evans from the Diocese of Truro is going to introduce what we're going to do. We're going to hear some different voices, some experts who have been trying some of this stuff out. Rebecca.
Thank you. We're delighted to be joined today by three of we call them experts by experience, who have they've been previous attendees of the Meet the Funders programme, whether it's this big spring event or whether it's some of the workshops in between. And they've actually successfully applied for and received funding from some of the funders during the last 10 years. And they're here to offer you both wisdom and encouragement in that. So we've got Joff, who's been involved in funding a number of small projects requiring a few £1,000s each. These included things like funding for a job club, a series of talks about faith-based social action that were called Tube Talks, a project creating a caravan chapel at a local caravan site, and also a community garden project. The experience that he gained from these smaller projects helped him with funding for a more significant project, which is the one he's here to talk about today, and that you may have heard of, Tube Station in Polzeth. Judith and Miranda have already featured, if you're paying attention closely, on one of the funders' presentations from the Cornwall Historic Churches Trust. They've been involved over several years now with a huge church building project in South Hill. So St Sampson's has undergone all sorts of changes and has things like mains water installation, window restoration, urgent roof repairs, and has even had a compostable toilet installed. So we're here just to have a few minutes to talk to them today and to glean some of their experience. I'm sure if you do have questions for them and you want to put them in the chat, they'll be able to answer them after this talk. So starting off, when you embarked on your funding journey, what would you say was the most daunting element for you, Judith?
The size of the project, it was massive because all of it is interlinked. You've mentioned some of the bits that we're doing, but it also involves major roof works as well as what you've mentioned, and heating and toilet and kitchen and everything. And everything's interlinked. So separating it out was really hard. We have sort of done that, and you have to separate out. Different funders want to fund different things, but working out where to start is a bit of a problem. Who do you go to first? What do you do first? It's just massive, but start you do have to do. So you just have to start somewhere. Our first start was actually engaging an architect at the very beginning. Well, actually our first start was coming to a Meet the Funders thing and then engaging an architect and getting all the background documents in place, really important. You change things as you go along. You take a step forward, you take a step back. But yeah, where do you start on a massive, massive project was one of the most daunting things.
Okay, thank you. And Miranda, you've been working very closely with Judith on this project. Is there anything that you'd say surprised you during the project that you weren't expecting, or something that happened?
I think, yeah, the first thing I think was how helpful the funders are and how keen they actually are to fund you. I think when we started out, and probably an awful lot of people think that they don't really want to fund you, you've really got to fight hard, but actually the opposite is true. They exist to give money away. And I think once we realised that was a big surprise, but once we realised that really helped and gives you more confidence in the applications.
Lovely, thank you. And Joff, what about you? What did you find that was the most daunting element of the project, and was there anything that surprised you during that process?
Yeah, I think generally, if you just look at a funding application, if you've never looked at one before, they seem quite terrifying. Very much like applying for planning permission or something. If you're not in the industry, you have no idea what a lot of the words mean. But I think on the other side of that, what surprised me was, again, kind of what Miranda said, is that people want to fund you. And actually the advice is there if you need it. You know, if you come to something like this Meet the Funders event, you can go around and talk to people, and actually, as you said, they want to fund you, so they want to talk to you and guide you through the process. So the best thing to do, if you don't know where to start, or don't know what to do or how to fill in a form, is simply just to ask someone that knows what they're doing, and they'll help you.
Lovely, thank you. And so considering that, what would your main bit of advice be for those that are here today looking to apply for funding, Joff?
I think the kind of biggest thing I learned through it was understanding the importance of language. I applied for a lot of kind of missional projects, thinking about growing the church or reaching out, outreach, that kind of stuff. But each individual funder looked for different words of what they kind of wanted you to be accomplishing. So if you kind of send out a one-size-fits-all kind of funding letter, you might not be hitting the same words or the right words they're looking for. But actually, if you look at the application forms and the websites of the funders, then keywords will pop up and phrases that they want you to use. So to use them when you're writing your applications, and make sure you hit those words and use the right language when you're writing. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. And Judith, what about you? Do you have anything to add to that?
As in sort of advice, yeah, be organised right from the beginning. It's very easy to think, I'll remember that. You won't, because, well, I won't. Miranda and I didn't. There's masses of things, so be organised. If you need to learn how to do spreadsheets, do it. Become a lover of spreadsheets, or find somebody else that can in your team, because really important. Write down the dates of when you applied, when you're expecting to hear from them, every bit of information you can. Really keep those good records. It will take you longer than you think, but that time in preparation is really important. Get your list of funders together. I think our spreadsheet is now over 100, probably near 120. I think this is over quite a few years, but start somewhere. You must. Yeah, learn those new skills. Engage with technology. I have learned masses in the last few years. Get yourself a Facebook page. Facebook is a wonderful thing, or it can be a wonderful thing. I had no idea how to use it properly before this. Use social media to your advantage. It works. Yeah, have someone to work with. Miranda and I work really closely. At one point, we were probably phoning each other every day, if not twice a day. You need somebody to work with. It could be a person, preferably more than that, a team. Somebody you can rant with, somebody you can laugh with, bounce ideas off. Really important to don't do it on your own. You need somebody else to do it with you. And don't be afraid to contact people any way you can. Talk to them, email them, knock on their door if they live close enough. Invite them to speak to you. Pick up the phone, put your fingers on the keyboard, talk to people.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think some of our smaller workshops that we'll be doing this year, hopefully some of those will be in person, and there'll be a great opportunity for people to meet one another and to network. Something that's perhaps missing sometimes from the Zoom calls is actually kind of gaining advice from others that is on the spot that you're not expecting to get from the day. So hopefully people will benefit from that over the coming months. So moving on a little bit now, Miranda, what would you say was the greatest benefit of, I say completing the project, but you haven't quite completed it, but completing perhaps an element of the project, or the part that you found the most satisfaction in?
I think for me, the greatest benefit has been people. The number of new people who've got involved with our church, either as worshippers, and that's been wonderful. We have attracted, in South Hill terms, a lot of new worshippers. That's not many because we're a tiny place, but we have attracted a lot of new worshippers. We've almost doubled the worshippers on a Sunday, which has just been truly amazing and wonderful. But also, so many people from the local community have got involved because they're interested in the building or engaging with the activities. They just want to help to fundraise for it or whatever it is. I think that has been, for me, the greatest benefit and has given amazing satisfaction. We were advised at the very start, when Judith and I started out on this, to make the project a mission project rather than a building project. I think that was the best advice we were ever given, because having that focus has absolutely made all the difference to our project and the difference to the people who are involved in it. It has been truly wonderful.
Brilliant. That's really encouraging to hear. Thank you. So final question to each of you then. Is there an element of the Meet the Funders programme that you found most helpful or particularly helpful during your journey, whether that was the main event or a particular one of the workshops or anything along those lines, really? Sorry, should we start off with Judith?
Okay. Yeah, so before, the talking to people, the conversations over the pasties, which we're missing on here, was really important, but actually getting to really talk to people. Dr. John Higgins yesterday from Joe Rank Trust, I've met him on a couple of times, and just so helpful to be able to talk to the person in person. I've since spoken to him on the phone, and you get those encouragement from those conversations and from the funders themselves. I mean, yesterday there were things I immediately was on the phone talking to people after yesterday's one as well. So yeah, meeting people, whether it's fellow fundraisers or the actual funders, and the encouragement from them is really important.
Great. And Geoff, have you got anything?
Yeah, I think similar, meeting the funders, talking through your projects. For me, I like quite out there, crazy ideas, and often you think that who's going to want to fund an idea like that, but actually talking through with different funders and different people, it actually made me believe in my projects and believe they were worth something, and gave me the kind of confidence to move forward and to apply for the money and the support. Yeah.
Brilliant, that's great to hear. And Miranda, sorry, have you got anything that you thought stood out on your Meet the Funders journey?
Well, certainly both the above that Judith and Geoff talked about. I think in addition, I think probably being given the really fundamental advice, the basic advice about how to structure a big capital project. Judith touched on that earlier on. The where to start, the order in which to do things and all that. That was just so helpful at the very beginning when our heads were all over the place, and that was brilliant.
Lovely. Well, once again, thank you for joining us today. I hope it's been helpful and encouraging to all of you that are perhaps partway through a project or just starting out on a project, just to see that it is achievable. And we really thank you for coming back to talk to us. It makes a big difference. So thank you very much for your time. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and thank you from me too. I've seen the works that are done at that have been done at South Hill. Absolutely fantastic. Well worth a visit. And I loved what you said about not just thinking about the building, but about what's going to happen in the building. Be mission led in that kind of work, and good things will happen. Great. We're right on track with our timings, and we're going to hear from another one of our speakers today, or at least we're going to hear the words of one of our speakers. This is from ASDA, but they weren't able to be here, and so instead I'm going to hand back to Rebecca, who's just been hosting this part, who's going to read ASDA's words on their behalf. So you have to imagine that Rebecca's turning up in one of those kind of green uniforms that people from ASDA wear, with a "Here to Help" sign somewhere written on her shirt. But Rebecca has ASDA's words for them. Rebecca.
Okay, so I'm not Jackie Lavender from ASDA, but unfortunately she can't be here, but she's kindly supplied us with her presentation. And Jackie is, in fact, the community champion for the Bodmin store. So I'm sure if you go into the Bodmin store, you'll be able to see her, or you have a look on their website. But she was also here representing the ASDA Foundation and Community Life. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the whole funding package. So I am reading her words, and I'm doing my best. So the Foundation and Community Life are two very important aspects of the business to ASDA. It's been said that the community is worth approximately £3 million to a store. And whilst that's not the main reason for community in ASDA stores, it does go a long way to showing why it's beneficial for them to engage with communities for their whole business. So community life for each store is all about supporting that community that surrounds that particular store. And obviously that varies from place to place. So in a big city, that might cover just around a mile around the store, but in more rural areas, it might cover 15 to 20 miles around the store. So it's best just to kind of check out what your local ASDA is doing. What they won't do is they won't overlap or encroach on another store's area, and they also don't want community groups and charities to apply for funding to multiple ASDA stores. So you have to really look at where your closest is and go for there. Each ASDA store has a community champion, and as I've already said, Jackie is the one for Bodmin. And they're responsible for all the donations for time, space and goods. They're responsible for the colleague dress-up days. So I think in one of our Meet the Funders, they came during World Book Day dressed up, but they do that as part of their regular time within ASDA, thinking that it helps to put a smile on shoppers' faces and perhaps make them happier as they go around. It's that community champion in each store that is also responsible for the allocation of grants and spending time in that community. So they will be engaged in getting to know the community, going out and volunteering at projects. So it might be worth even contacting them to ask if they can come out to your project as well. So Jackie mentions that each community champion volunteers within the community, and she herself volunteers at the local magistrates court with a charity called CAS. And also is at a community larder, amongst a number of other things. And sometimes those are smaller projects like litter picking in a particular area. She also gets, which is probably, I guess, the highlight of her job, is delivering the cheques to the winners. You know, those giant cheques that they bring out and take photographs of, to the winners of the green token. It's very important for ASDA, as with any other funder, to see where the money is going, to visit the groups and to take some photographs. They want to make stories, they want to promote what's going on, and they want to let others know in the community what it is that they've funded. So Jackie mentioned that just last week she'd been to visit Lou's Scout group, where they were on their forage, that's a bit of a tongue twister there, with an open fire, and she got to take some photographs, meet with them, give out the cheque for their green tokens. So in your little booklet, it does say a little bit about what ASDA particularly fund, but to summarise here, it says that ASDA Foundation supports small grassroots organisations through grant giving. Their mission is to transform communities and improve lives within the UK. So just to note that actually ASDA isn't a funder that funds abroad. A well-known grant within ASDA that I'm sure if you've ever been into their store you'll have seen is the green tokens. You probably have been given some of those little green discs when you're doing your shopping to pop into one of the collection points. Although I think during COVID this was taken away, but it's hoping to be coming back soon. So within that green token scheme, in each voting period, the winner can receive a maximum of £500. That's for first place. Second place is £400 and third place is £300. And that's achieved by filling in a fairly short form. I think we did one as our netball club a few years ago, and it was actually a very straightforward form to receive that money, and you are guaranteed to get at least £300. So each group of nominations that they receive goes before a select group of store colleagues, and then 3 get voted through to the ASDA Foundation. The application doesn't get destroyed, but is kept and held over to the next round of voting as well, so you sort of get a second chance at that. The ASDA Foundation also have a few other grants available for charities and good causes. The 2 main ones are Empowering Local Communities and Under 18 Better Starts. The Under 18 Better Starts is obviously aimed at young people under the age of 18 and supports 4 options. These are supporting essentials, being active, improving well-being, and celebrations that bring children together. So if one of your projects involves something like that, that might be something that you could apply for. Empowering Local Communities is about supporting whole communities and again has 4 different criteria. One is about building resilient communities, something that we've seen a lot of during COVID. Another is active lives, celebrations and festivals, and healthier lives. So do have a look at the website for those different things. Jackie's then given a few of her top tips for funding. Some of those will be found in the booklet, but she's just gone into a little bit more detail here. So I'm just going to run through some of those for the moment. Remember that whenever you're applying for funding, it's about building a relationship with that funder. So you may go to them for a particular thing that you want funded, but actually in a couple of years' time, you might end up going back to them for something else. And it's good if you haven't burnt your bridges in that first process. So you've remembered to look at what the monitoring is that they need, and also to say thank you. We've heard that a few times, but making sure that you keep in contact with funders. They want to promote the good work that you're doing, so thank them for the grant, send them some photographs, send them some outcomes, those stories that kind of really encapsulate everything it is that your funding is about, your project is about. Another one that Jackie mentions is quite important is just taking the time to fill the application in properly. Making sure that you're eligible, but also checking spelling and making sure that it's clear what you're writing. So Jackie's been in this role for 7 years, and she still gets letters addressed to previous champions. It doesn't take very long just to check who the champion is in that store at that time. And by putting the name of the person on it, it makes it less of a generic application and shows that you've really thought it through. They do still accept some of them as being handwritten, but obviously that kind of depends on your handwriting if you're going to get much further than that. I sent a letter the other day to somebody that I hadn't spoken to for a while and suggested about sea swimming because she was ill, and she messaged me back and asked what sea swirling was, and I realised I'd written it in quite a rush and hadn't been very clear. But particularly for grant applications, Jackie says there's a number of people that despite trying to contact them, she's been unable to decipher what their email address is or their postal address, and she's tried different kind of combinations of that and it hasn't got to them. And on that same point, really, spam, if you get a first response from Asda by email, it may very well go into your spam filter. So it's always good to keep an eye on that and then to accept them in your address book so that future communications don't go in there. It's really disappointing if you've missed out on that opportunity just because you haven't seen it. So please do check that. Jackie goes on to talk about charity numbers and says it's really important to share your charity number. So if you are a registered charity, you should have your charity number on every piece of paper, every headed letter, on the bottom of your emails. Now, for many churches, you're not registered as a charity because there is an exemption for churches under a certain amount of income, which I think covers most of our churches, if not all of them in Cornwall. So please don't pop on the diocesan charity number or put on any other number that you found on a piece of paper. I often get people just asking me to check what their charity number is, and they've written down just a random number that they've seen somewhere. If you're unsure for any reason, then you can go onto the Charity Commission website and pop in the name of your charity and the charity number will come up. And so if you're not sure whether as a church you are registered, it's probably a good idea to find out, but just have a look on there and it will let you know. And that's partly because, as Jackie mentions, in the past, they were able to just kind of give out things to people as they came into store. They might come in and say, could I have a raffle prize? And she could quickly put together a few things and give them out to somebody. But actually, there's a lot more accountability now. And so that's not possible. So you do need to make sure that you filled in the information correctly. So that kind of draws Jackie's presentation to an end, but she did want to emphasise that although she's put some tips in there about things that she really encourages you to do, and it might sound a bit ranty, she said, that actually she has a wonderful time in her role and she's met some amazing people and some fantastic projects. And she just wanted to encourage everybody that actually the things that you're doing in part of your community do make a massive difference to people's lives. And that's really what we're here and all about. So thank you very much. Okay, I think I'm handing back to Bishop Hugh now for a moment.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'd love to say that we'll take questions for Asda and that Rebecca will answer them as fully as she's just shared the information from Asda, but I suspect that would be unfair, Rebecca, am I right? That, yeah. If you do have questions, though, as with others who weren't able to be here, do send them in through the chat box, and we'll see what we can do to get your questions to Jackie and the team at Asda. But thank you, Rebecca. Now, change of kind of tone again. Now we've heard from organisations, we've heard also from some of our experts who've tried some things out, and we're going to go now into breakout rooms, into the workshop time. A couple of practical details about that. You should, when you signed up for today, have indicated which workshop you'd like to join. And if you did do that, and so long as you are logged in to your Zoom account using the same email that you registered for this event, then you will automatically join the breakout room that you have already chosen. If either you didn't indicate or you're using a different email address, then you're going to need to choose the workshop, which in the little kind of selection choice box that will appear on your screen. It should be straight in front of you. If you're on some of the smaller devices, an iPad or a phone, it may be that you're going to need to go down to the bottom of your screen or somewhere on your screen and find a little box that says something like breakout or breakout rooms, and you'll need to click that and then make your choice. If you try that out or haven't got a clue even how to begin trying that out and need a bit of help, put a message into the chat box, and Daniel, who's organising amazingly all of the tech today, will make sure that you end up in the right place. So you're going to head off to your groups, and I hope you have a fantastic time. We'll come back together again for a final session together for any kind of wrap up and reflections. We'll see you back again in a little while. Have a very good time. Welcome back, everyone. We're just waiting for one of the groups to come back. I hope that's been helpful for you and given you a little bit more detail to add to everything we've already heard today. Just check whether everyone's back. I think we're still waiting for a couple of people, and we're going to come towards a close once everyone's back together again. Might pick up a couple of reflections or thoughts through the chat box. We've got one more thing for everyone to do together, and a couple of bits of information that I'll share with you about what you might want to do next to carry on whatever it is that your piece of work, your journey is towards your project. Okay, I'm not sure whether everyone's back again or not, but we'll continue on. Yep, I'm getting some thumbs up. Very good. Well, good. Welcome back. First of all, just before we say anything else, can I say an enormous thank you to you for being part of today, for sitting on Zoom and joining us. To you also, for the vision that you have, the work that you've already done, the work that you're going to do in loving and serving your local communities in whatever it is that your plan, your project is. Thank you so much for that. Thank you also to our speakers. It's a really generous thing to give your time to an event like this. Thank you to the National Churches Trust, to Garfield Weston, to the Cornish Historic Churches Trust, to ASDA. I hope that you have found that this is a good investment of that time, and I'm really confident that the time that you've given this morning will grow into things, some of which we'll know about and some of which we might never see, but will grow into things in local communities across Cornwall, which are for the benefit of the whole community. And we're really grateful for the time that you've given us today. Now, here's something that we're all going to do together. We're going to, I think if you were here yesterday, you did a Menti poll or a Mentimeter, which gave you a chance as you were arriving to answer the question, how am I feeling today? And we're going to do another one of those just now to give a chance to ask the question as you leave this. How are you feeling at the end of Meet the Funders? So here's what you need to do if you want to do this. There's a QR code that you should see on your screen. If you point your phone at it, or the camera of your phone at it, that will take you to a website, a place called a Mentimeter. And there you'll have the chance to put in a word or a couple of words perhaps that describe or that answer that question. How are you feeling at the end of the Meet the Funders spring event? It'll give us a chance to kind of listen to each other, to express our feelings and our thoughts to each other, because once you've put your words in, hopefully through the wonders and miracles of technology, all those words will appear for all of us to see in a kind of word cloud. So we'll give you a minute or two to find your phone, to find your camera, to point the camera towards the blobs on the screen, the QR code on the screen, to open the website and to add those words. Just as a reminder, the words that you and others who were part of the day yesterday put in when the day was beginning, here are some of the words. People said they were excited, they were curious, they were uncertain, they were interested, they were intrigued, they were Zoom weary, and they were busy. Those are some of the words that were put in yesterday morning. So it'll be interesting to see what might be on your minds and in your hearts as we come towards a close. Here we are. Here are some words appearing. Grateful, knowledgeable, confident, excited, hopeful. These are wonderful words. Encouraged, thankful, inspired, informed. Transformation Cornwall team will be delighted to know that you feel informed, that this has been practically useful to you. You've got more information. It's moving around quite fast. I can't see all the words as they shift around. Encouraged, ready, it's a good word, knowledgeable. There's probably a few that are less obviously straightforwardly positive. A bit worded out. Yes, there's been an awful lot of information. I hope that in the days to come you can filter that through to the stuff that's been that's particularly helpful for you. But there we are. There are the words. The big words mean that lots of you have put them down. They're the words that have been most used: informed, excited, inspired, hopeful, and confident. That's wonderful. That's exactly what we as a team hosting this and putting this together would have wanted. So I'm delighted to hear that. A couple of things going forward from this. The first is something that, just to remind you, something that Judith said when she was talking to us about their work in St. Sampson's. In response to that question, what do I do if I'm not sure what to do? If I'm at the beginning of a project and I just don't know what to do? And Judith's response was, talk to someone. And just to remind you that one of the things that Transformation Cornwall is here to do is to be one of the places that you can go to talk to someone. We don't just lay on a day like this, where there are lots of people and lots of information. We're also really keen to have one-to-one conversations with you. So if you are at that stage, you've got an idea, or you've got more than an idea and you know what it's going to take, but you just have no idea how to take the first step, then do pick up the phone or send an email to Transformation Cornwall. Actually, probably send an email is better than picking up the phone, and they would be really pleased to have that conversation with you. A couple of more practical things. The community workshops program is all in this orange leaflet, which came in your little box. Do have a look at that. There's a whole series of different workshops, events, bits of information, resources that are coming up. The first of those is on the 16th of June on the subject vision setting and project planning. A really good first step if you're trying to get something up and running. So do have a look at that. The best way to keep in the loop with the Meet the Funders team and with the work that happens here, but which happens in other ways throughout the year, is by joining the Transformation Cornwall's mailing list. You'll be sent a link to that after this event, and I really encourage you, I get it regularly, I really encourage you to sign up to that link if you can, if you do that kind of thing, because it's always full of interesting information and links to the kind of things and people and organisations that we've heard from today. That's the mailing list. And then finally, just to say, all the presentations, all the resources that we've heard today will be emailed out to all of you directly after this event. If for some reason you suspect you're here but Transformation Cornwall don't have your email address, then do let us know. I think that's everything that we needed to say. If anyone had a final comment to put into the chat box, please do. I can see a couple of thank yous. A very useful, absolutely fantastic event. Do put those into the chat box. Any other kind of reflections, any feedback that you might have for us at Transformation Cornwall, for the team at Transformation Cornwall, do put it in there as well. Now let me close with a prayer. It's the prayer for your project journey. It's in your pack of resources in your toolkit, and it's a beautiful prayer. And maybe you pray it with me wherever you are and whatever's on your heart today. For each step that I might take, be my guide, O Lord of life. For each load that I might bear, be my strength, O Lord of life. For each mountain I might face, be my power, O Lord of life. For each river that might impede, be my safety, O Lord of life. For each place where I might rest, be my peace, O Lord of life. for each sunrise and sunset. Be my joy, O Lord of life. Amen. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to go and have my pasty. I hope you might have something similar somewhere near you. We'll see you again. God bless you all, and thank you for everything that you do. Bye.